Larry, are we ready? Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call to order the Winston-Salem Urban Area Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting. And, the following statement, due to the Safer at Home order issued by Governor Cooper, members of the Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting are participating virtually. All members will vote by roll call. A member will be recognized, at which time the member will state his or her vote. So I will ask that Kirk, please, as the recording secretary, if you could take the roll call by name.
Thank you, Tanique. I'll just go through everyone I have who's a voting member. And again, if some of you have joined since I took the roll, please let me know at the end. Kelly Bennett.
Here.
Carrie Gentry. Carrie, I think I saw you. Tanique.
Yes, here.
Suzette Morales.
Present.
Daryl Vreeland.
Here.
Pat Ivy.
Here.
Kelly Garvin.
Here.
Lee Rollins.
Here.
Megan Garner. Scott Snow.
Here.
And Scott Ryan.
Here.
Did I miss any voting members who've just joined?
Scott Buffkin, Village of Clemens.
Thank you, Scott.
Donna Woodson, Winston-Salem Transit Authority.
Thank you. All right, Tanique, I think that's it.
Thank you, everyone. So we will move on to our first item on our agenda. Was there anyone that joined the meeting for public comment? Byron, Larry, do you have anyone? No?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Then at this time, we will move into our action items. The first item is the consideration of the September 17th, 2020 agenda. I hope that you all have had an opportunity to read and review the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion for acceptance?
Making a Scott Snow motion to approve agenda.
Thank you, Scott. Would anyone like to second? Thank you, Donna. At this time, Kirk, I'd ask you that you call the roll for the vote.
Kelly Bennett.
Aye.
Carrie Gentry.
Aye. Aye.
Tanique.
Yes.
Suzette Morales.
I'm non-voting.
Thank you. Daryl Vreeland.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Kelly Garvin.
Yes.
I vote yes. Lee Rollins.
Yes.
Scott Buffkin.
Yes.
Megan Garner.
Yes.
Scott Snow voted yes. Scott Ryan.
Yes.
And Donna Woodson voted yes also. Motion passes unanimously.
And my phone was muted earlier. This is St. Perkins in Louisville. I'm yes as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We will move into the Regarding and consideration, well, we won't have the public hearing at this meeting. We'll actually have a public hearing at the TAC meeting. But the consideration of amendments to the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Planning Update, including the Congestion Management Plan and the update to the Winston-Salem Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. M2. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read on two screens. Byron, I will let you introduce our guests from VHB, please.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. As you know, the Winston-Salem MPO staff, along with the consultants with VHB, have been working on updates to the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. During our last meeting, we adopted this new plan, but we mentioned that it's a working document, which means it would be amended from time to time based on project development, federal requirements, and updates of information as needed. Today, we have staff from VHB, which we will be discussing the MTP amendments in the Congestion Management Plan, which is up for adoption today. As we continue to update our plan, we'll bring back our comprehensive transportation plan back in January for action. This item for our public participation plan requires a 30-day public comment period and a public hearing, which we'll have during the TAC meeting. During that time, no comments were received. I'll now turn it over to the VHB staff to present the Congestion Management Plan and the MTP updates.
Thank you, Byron. I'm Luba Zuva here with VHB Study Team. I'm happy to be with you all here today to provide an update regarding the MTP plan amendment proposed for adoption today, and also the congestion management process update. Thank you, Byron, for pulling up my slides on the screen. So regarding the MTP amendment, something to note is that when this committee and the TAC approved the MTP plan back in September, there haven't been any changes proposed to the list of projects that was adopted back in September. So what we are considering for amendment today is an update to Chapter 3, including updated explanation of how the federal required transportation planning factors are incorporated into the transportation planning process as part of the MTP. And there has been an update to the financial plan, which is further explained in Chapter 6 and also in some of the appendix tables. So Byron, you can go to the next slide, please. So regarding the federal required transportation planning factors, you can see on the screen what those factors are. With the FAST Act adopted in December of 2015, there has been an increased emphasis on a couple of the later factors, especially resiliency and reliability, so taking into account extreme weather events and stormwater, and also enhancing travel and tourism. So if you go and look at the updated MTP document that's posted on the study website, in Chapter 3, there was additional explanation provided as far as how the transportation planning process incorporates those federal required transportation planning factors. And next slide, please, Byron. And then the financial plan is where some of the more substantial changes took place. But again, something to note is that none of the projects that were previously approved for inclusion in the MTP were added or removed from the plan. So the changes were kind of more global throughout those financial plan tables. So we have changed the headings and the titles to change reference to the financial plan instead of using the term fiscally constrained. And also the inflation factor was incorporated throughout. So this inflation that's expected was added to both the project cost side. In addition, it was also incorporated as part of the revenue estimation. So it is expected that the revenues over time will continue to increase, and of course, project implementation cost will also increase. Also, we took into account additional maintenance funding categories, specifically the Powell bill funding, which is, the state passes on to municipalities for maintenance of locally maintained roads. That line item was previously not included in the financial plan, so it is now included, and we did not break out any specific projects as part of that line item, but it is now carried forward as part of the financial plan tables. Next slide, please, Byron. So this next slide just illustrates some of the detail regarding how those changes were incorporated and promulgated throughout those financial plan tables in the MTP plan report. We do have this even larger financial plan table included as one of the appendices where you can see a listing of all the various projects and their funding categories. And again, the inflation and the year of expenditure dollars is now included as part of those financial plan tables. Next slide, please. So this next slide just illustrates what the plan recommendations updated table in Appendix C now includes. So this long list of projects that are by different mode, by different category, they're included now with their estimated cost, again, with year of expenditure dollars, so inflation taken into account, and then also type of funding is also listed out for those projects. Next slide, please. All right, and then the next element of the MTP, we think of it as sort of an appendix to the MTP. The congestion management process can often be updated as a standalone document, but it is typically recommended that it be coordinated with the additional transportation planning processes. So in this case, we were able to update the congestion management processes sort of as part of the MTP plan update, but it was it took us just a little bit longer to finish the CMP update. So for the CMP today, we're going to review what is this process, what are some of the congestion issues happening in the region right now, and what are some of the strategies that the CMP plan identifies. Next, please. So congestion management process, this is one of the federal requirements that larger urban areas, over 200,000 population, have this additional requirement as part of the transportation planning process. The CMP, congestion management process update, does not have an exact specified timeline as compared with some of the other plan updates. So unlike an MTP, it doesn't have to happen on a 5-year cycle, but again, it's probably good practice to continue updating congestion management process in coordination with the MTP and other transportation planning documents so that they can cross-reference and identify some of the strategies that are mutually beneficial. So this is meant to be a systematic, regionally accepted approach for managing congestion. And generally, one of the background factors for requiring a CMP is that there's this interest in identifying additional measures for dealing with congestion. So looking beyond widening, what else can the region do? What else can be accomplished through additional measures that might be more cost effective, whether it be travel demand management, express buses, carpooling, or could it be done through technology, possibly some of the information technology solutions. So some of those strategies are incorporated as part of the congestion management process. Next, please. So when we look at the status of congestion, the Urban Mobility Report published by the Texas A&M Transportation Institute every couple of years is one of those good sources of data where we look to see how the urban areas across the country are doing in terms of congestion. And the last time they released their congestion scorecard for Winston-Salem area, this was before COVID, so of course we have to take that into account. Currently, we are probably seeing a slight decline in traffic across most urban areas. Of course, the rates have come back since April, but we're still probably seeing a slight decline, a little bit more of a leveling of trips across the day. So the morning peak is probably less pronounced. The afternoon peak is a little bit more spread out across a wider time frame. So again, this congestion report from the TTI from Texas A&M Transportation Institute is looking more at pre-COVID conditions, and we are expecting that once the COVID pandemic is more under control, that our travel conditions will probably return more to this kind of normal state the next couple of years. So we have been seeing an increase in congestion over time, and that means that on average, a traveler traveling in this region sees more congestion on an everyday basis, and that translates into basically hours of your time lost due to commuting, and that means that there's increased cost to the economy, increased cost to individual households and families, of course, also from being stuck in traffic, but then there's cost to the freight and logistics companies because their truck drivers are stuck in traffic. There's cost to businesses who are trying to accomplish something and maybe their contractors are stuck on I-40 and they're not able to get to their next job site in time to finish a task for the day. So there's generally a variety of costs that are borne by society at large. So even though, for any one person, congestion burden might not be that huge, when you combine it together, it does add up to a significant cost to society overall, which is why congestion is a real issue, and there is this interest in looking at a variety of ways to mitigate congestion. Next slide, please. So as part of the MTP plan update, as you might remember, there was an online survey, the first round of the survey completed by the public back in May. And as part of that survey, we asked people for their specific concerns with regards to traffic and roadway conditions. And they were also able to add markers on the map to indicate where those concerns are. So the map on the slide illustrates where we were seeing some of those comments from the public indicating, hey, here's some problems that we are seeing. And then the bar chart just illustrates what types of roadway concerns were people trying to comment on. And so, of course, congestion was seeing the highest number of comments from those survey comments submitted. So kind of the areas around Bermuda Run, that area around Salem Parkway and 40 interchange, Winston-Salem, kind of more central area, and then Kernersville are some of those congestion hotspots, as well as those key north-south, east-west corridors. So kind of, again, those major travel corridors throughout the region. Next slide, please. So in addition to public feedback, two of the sources of data we looked at for congestion were also the regional travel demand model, which is where we're looking at the future conditions expected, well, base year conditions for 2017 in addition to future conditions for 2045. And we also looked at some of the real-time cell phone data from 2018. In this case, here is the provider of the data. And so you can kind of see the two maps side by side. On the left is the corridors identified in the travel demand model based on a volume to capacity over 0.9 for base year conditions. And then on the right are those corridors that are showing up as highlighted corridors of concern in terms of congestion based on the here cell phone data. So there's some overlap. You know, they're showing a slightly different areas as well, but for the most part, there is quite a bit of overlap between those. And something to note again is that the travel demand models are generally a great tool for looking at larger trends, but they're not always as nuanced to show the impacts of an individual intersection backup or individual, you know, if you improve one interchange or one intersection, what's going to happen with the traffic flow overall. Next slide, please. So then we looked at the future year conditions based on the travel demand model. And so you can see that those areas of concern for congestion have basically increased. But once we look 25 years out, so in addition to the corridors already highlighted, we're now seeing additional corridors coming into play based on the volume to capacity ratio of 0.9. And then if you look at the MTP plan recommendations, there's a variety of intelligent transportation systems improvements that are identified, and this is based also on the tried ITS plan, which has been completed in the last couple of years. So the lines in light green on the map to the right, those are some of the corridors that were highlighted in the ITS plan and also in the MTP plan as needing some of those intelligent transportation system improvements. They could vary from, you know, prioritizing signal timing along a corridor to provide a smooth progression for traffic to flow. On I-40 corridor in this case, there are recommendations for bus on shoulder, improvements that would allow, for example, express buses to travel on the shoulder of the roadway during peak congestion periods. There could be some ramp metering projects. Those are the types of projects you could see, or maybe additional information systems for travelers to be aware of hotspots and congestion coming up ahead. Next slide, please, Byron. So in updating the congestion management process for the region, the study team again identified those key priority congested corridors, and primarily those corridors were for major arterials and interstate highway corridors. And then we've looked at some of the improvements that are already identified in terms of widening the and roadway capacity, but we're also looking at what are some of the mitigation strategies. And so there's a variety of mitigation strategies spelled out in the CMP document, and those include, again, the transportation demand management strategies such as van pooling, carpooling, and utilizing our other programs that part already has in place. Public transportation, of course, there's some existing public transportation services already in place, but there's an opportunity to improve the transit system and the services already provided. There's an opportunity to provide improved bicycle and pedestrian facilities, especially in combination with public transit improvements. Those could have a more far-reaching effect once you give somebody more of an option to not only take the bus somewhere, but then also be able to walk that last quarter mile to their destination. Parking management also comes into play with the region such as Winston-Salem that's rich in very vibrant downtowns, especially in downtown areas. Parking can be at a premium, and then how you decide to price your parking during different times of the day, that can have an impact on traveler behavior and kind of make a difference for somebody deciding whether they want to, hop on a bus or take an Uber or drive there for their dinner, for example. And again, maybe not so much during the COVID conditions, but when the conditions return to more or less normal, then we expect that parking availability again will play a role. And then roadway modernization, those are the types of improvements where we kind of grouping together intersection improvements, for example, adding a left turn lane, or other improvements that can have a more nuanced local effect on traffic conditions. It might not be big enough widening projects to show up to have an effect on the travel demand model output, but again, they can have very specific beneficial local effects in terms of traffic flow and congestion reduction, and also improve safety at the same time. Access management is also one of those types of treatments where if you add medians or combined driveways, it can improve the traffic flow. It can also improve safety on a corridor. Next slide, please. So we have posted the draft documents online for a 30-day public comment period, as Byron has mentioned, and we held a public meeting for the MTP amendment and the congestion management process on October 22nd. We have not received any comments from the public regarding the MTP amendment or the CMP at this point, and so we think that this should be relatively at least at this point, we're not hearing any concerns from the public or stakeholders for the MTP amendment proposed and the congestion management process. So with that, I'd like to see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Luba. Are there any questions? Comments? All right, well, hearing none, this is an action item for adoption of the amendments and the congestion management plan, which is a part of the amendment to the MTP. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chairman, Scott Ryan, I'd like to make a motion to accept that plan and have that presented to the TAC for adoption.
Thank you, Scott.
And
Donna Woodson, I will make a motion. Second that.
So I heard, I guess, Donna Woodson. Scott, I heard you trying to chime in also.
Yes, I was just seconding the motion.
Okay. Thank you. So it's been properly first and seconded to adopt this plan for consideration for the TAC's consideration. Kurt, if you will call the roll for the vote, please.
Kelly Bennett.
Aye.
Carrie Gentry.
yes.
Tanique.
Yes.
Daryl Vreeland.
Yes.
Pat Ivy.
Yes.
Kelly Garvin.
Yes.
I vote yes. Lee Rollins.
Yes.
Scott Buffkin.
Yes.
Chris Jensen.
Yes.
Hank Perkins.
Yes.
Megan Garner.
Yes.
Megan, are you there?
Yes.
Thank you. Scott Ryan voted yes, and Donna Woodson voted yes, so the motion is unanimous.
Thank you, everyone. We will move on to item number 4, which is consideration of the fiscal year 2020 through 2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program amendments and modifications for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. Byron?
Okay. The Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or MTIP, is a comprehensive listing of all the projects programmed for the Winston-Salem urban area. This document must match the state's Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, which is regularly updated with amendments, modification, and deletions of projects. The included amendments and modifications before you were reviewed by the public for 30 days per our public participation policy from August 15, 2020 to September 16, 2020. Including this packet are modifications to statewide projects and some local projects such as the Beltway and US 158 projects, which are delayed for right-of-way acquisition, as well as part amendments. I'll be happy to answer any questions about this item.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Byron about action item number 4? Or agenda item number 4? No questions? Would anyone like to make a motion for consideration of approval?
Pat Ivy, move approval.
Thank you, Pat. Would anyone like to make a second on that motion, please?
Scott Ryan will second.
Thank you, Scott. Kirk, if you please call the roll for our vote.
Kelly Bennett.
Aye.
Terry Gentry.
Yes.
Tanique.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly Garvin.
Yes.
I vote yes. Lee Rollins.
Yes.
Scott Buffkin.
Yes.
Chris Jensen.
Yes.
Hank Perkins.
Yes.
Megan Garner.
Yes.
Scott Snow.
Yes.
Scott Ryan voted yes. And Donna.
Donna, yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. All right, we will move along to agenda item number 5, which is the consideration of a letter of support for Davidson County Department of Senior Services, the Workshop of Davidson, and Life Center of Davidson County for North Carolina. For the North Carolina Department of Transportation Federal Transit Section 5310 funding. I do apologize, I'm having trouble reading today. So that would be Kelly, that would cover this item, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. The item before you, as mentioned, is the consideration for letter of support for Davidson County Department of Senior Services, the Workshop of Davidson, and Life Center of Davidson County for North Carolina's FTA Section 5310 funding. NCDOT's Public Transportation Division administers the application and the selection process for allocation of federal transit administration 5310 funds. The Section 5310 program provides funding to improve the abilities for seniors and individuals with disabilities by removing barriers to the transportation services and expanding the transportation mobility options. The Workshop of Davidson, Life Center of Davidson County, and the Davidson County Department of Senior Services provide services within the MPO area and in the rural areas of Davidson County for disabled persons and individuals over 65 years old, 65 years and older. Only services, however, that are provided within the UZA of the urban area, the MPO, are eligible for funding by the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. For areas determined not to be within the UZA, these providers can apply for funding through the state's Section 5310 funding. This letter of support acknowledges these agencies' desire to participate in the state's competitive selection process for services provided outside of the MPO's UZA, and it also acknowledges the TCC's support of these agencies to apply for this funding. The Workshop of Davidson has requested $130,000. Life Center of Davidson County has requested $48,000, and Davidson County Department of Senior Services has requested $250,000 from the state's recruitment program. If approved by the TCC and I think by the TEC later on today, the letters will be signed or included in your packet and provided to these agencies. I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kelly. Does anyone have any questions for Kelly? If not, would anyone like to make a motion? Please.
Mullins,
This is
motion
Donna
to
Wilson. I'll
approve.
make a motion to approve.
All right, I heard two people speaking. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, this is Donna Wilson. I make a motion to approve.
All right, thank you, Donna. Would anyone like to second the motion?
Madam Chairman, this is Scott Ryan. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Scott. So it's been properly moved and seconded. All in, oh, I'm sorry. Kurt, can you call the roll, please?
Kelly Bennett.
Aye.
Carrie.
Yes.
Tanique.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Kelly Garvin.
Yes.
I vote yes. Lee Rollins.
Yes.
Scott Buffkin.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Hank.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Scott Snow.
Yes.
And Scott Ryan and Donna both voted yes, so the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Madam Chairman, a comment for that?
Yes, sir.
For the city of Winston-Salem, I know that you manage those grant funds through FTA on behalf of this agency in Davidson County. There has been a few things that have been a little bit off schedule with integrated mobility at Ncdot, so I'm not, it'd be worthwhile for the city to confirm that state DOT is actually going to be distributing 5310 funds under this fiscal year when they're managing the CARES Act dollars at a higher priority. So that's just something to be aware of process that may be a little bit off the normal schedules.
We will make sure to share that with those agencies because they do apply for those directly through Ncdot, and they're not; those aren't managed by us.
Yes, ma'am.
But we'll be sure to share that with those agencies. So thank you for explaining.
You bet.
All right, we will move on to agenda item number 6, which would be for a public hearing at the TAC meeting, but consideration of the Federal Transit Administration Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Grant, which is a Section 5310 and Section 5307 Job Access and Reverse Commute Funds, and plans to amend the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal year 2020 funding. And I guess that's me that would discuss this item. I'll present this item to the group. These are the Section 5310 and Section 5307 funding, similar to what was in the last item, Scott, that we actually administer. And these are funds that were appropriated to the MPO for fiscal year 2020. We held a call for projects for these funds and received for the 5310 funding, we received 8 applications requesting a total of $845,827. For fiscal year 2020, we only had $365,651 available for Section 5310. And for the 5307 JARC funding, we had $55,000 available, and we only had 2 agencies to submit applications requesting $31,000. In the packet, there's an attachment that shows the recommended distribution of funding. That recommendation is based upon an evaluation that was conducted by the Burlington area MPO staff. They reviewed all of our applications. They provided a score and based upon the score that the subrecipients received, there was a recommended distribution of funding based upon the fundings that we had available and not specifically related to the amount of funding that each of the agencies requested. So with that, we have submitted the list of agencies with the funding recommendation. You will see a token amount of funding to be recommended to the Winston-Salem Transit Authority, and the balance of the funds for the Section 5307 fund. The reason that we include the Winston-Salem Transit Authority in these applications now is basically if the agencies that have requested these funding face difficulties and are unable to spend the funding down before we would lose the funds, then we would find if other agencies are able to receive those funds, and if they can't, then we would distribute those funds to the Winston-Salem Transit Authority so that we don't lose the benefit of the funding availability in our MPO. At this time, I will answer any questions that anyone has. Oh, I did mention that we did have this open for a public review for a 30-day period, and we did not receive any comments. So now I will take any questions that anyone has related to this item. All right, if no questions, this is an action item. Would anyone like to make a motion for approval, please?
Pat Ivy, move approval.
Thank you, Pat. Would anyone like to make a motion second, please?
Scott Ryan will second.
Thank you, Scott. So it's been moved and seconded, and we will ask Kirk to please take the roll for the vote.
Kelly Bennett,
Aye.
Carrie,
Yes.
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly Garvin,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee Rollins,
Yes.
Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Hank Perkins, Hank, what's your pleasure on this vote? Moving on, Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Ryan voted yes. And Donna?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to agenda item number 7, which is the consideration of the Winston-Salem Transit Authority's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. And I will present this item. In July of 2018, FTA published the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan final rule, which required operators of public transportation systems that receive federal funds under FTA's urbanized area formula to develop safety plans that include the processes and procedures to implement safety management systems. WISTA has provided the attached safety plan. This item was presented at our last meeting. Since that time, WISTA has only made some grammatical or spelling corrections in the document, but as far as the document itself, everything remains as it was. So at this time, they are presenting this plan for approval. And if it's the pleasure of the body to approve their safety plan, I think they've also had approval by their board, and so this will be their plan that will be in place, and there will be some additional next steps as far as adopting some performance measures that this body will need to take at a later date. But at this time, the plan is included. I hope that you all have had an opportunity to review, and I will open the floor up for any questions. No questions?
Dr. Nick, this is Donna. If I may add to your explanation of the plan, that this plan originally was requested by the state to be approved and implemented by July, but it was extended due to the COVID-19 pandemic until December 2020. Staff and I worked on this plan to implement if the board so approves, and it is confirmed that the Winston-Salem Transit Authority Board of Directors did approve and adopt the plan after with the necessary grammatical corrections. So if the board approves thus far today, it will be distributed, and the operators and staff will be educated and trained on the implementation by January 2021.
Thank you for that, Donna. Are there any questions? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to recommend approval of the safety plan for Winston Transit Authority.
Thank you, Scott. Can I get a second, please?
Megan Garner, I'll second.
Thank you, Megan. It's been moved and seconded. Kirk, if you could please take the roll for the vote.
Kelly Bennett?
Aye.
Carrie?
Yes.
Tanique?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes, yes.
Pat? I'm sorry, Pat, I didn't hear you.
That was a yes.
Kelly Garvin?
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee Rollins?
Yes.
Scott Buffkin?
Yes.
Chris Jensen?
Yes.
Hank Perkins? Hank, are you still there?
Yes.
Megan voted yes. Scott Snow?
Yes.
Scott Ryan voted yes. And Donna?
Yes.
Thank you. Vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, we have, our next item is agenda item number 8, consideration of the Winston-Salem Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization's Federal Functional Classification Update in process. And that would be Byron, please.
Good afternoon again, everyone. During our last meeting, I presented information on the purpose and procedures for modifying the Winston-Salem Urban Area Federal Functional Classification Network. Again, this network describes the characteristics of a roadway for us to be able to better prepare and understand the road hierarchy in our region, transportation planning, improve network efficiency, understand federal funding and guidelines, as well as assist us in data collection. 2 of the roadways that were presented during the last discussion were suggestions by Ncdot to add to our original submittal request that was done several years ago. This being the addition of Main Street from 6th Street to North Liberty, adding that as a major collector, and the addition of Rams Drive from MLK to Research Parkway, adding that as a minor collector. With the approval of the board, these road segments will be added to our current request for modifications to be reviewed by Ncdot and FHWA. Staff will be conducting an open call for requests to modify our FFC network beginning tomorrow. I would be more than happy to answer any questions about any of these roadway modification requests. There is a map included in your packet which shows the 2 locations that are being requested to be added to our modification request as well.
Thank you, Byron. Are there any questions for Byron? All right, hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion for approval?
Pat Ivy,
Thank you, Pat. Would anyone like to make a motion to second?
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Lee Rollins, second.
Thank you, Lee. It's been properly moved and seconded. Kirk, can you please call the roll for the vote?
Kelly Bennett,
Aye.
Harry,
Yes.
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
yes.
Pat voted yes, Kelly Garvin,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes, Lee voted yes, Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Hank,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Mark Kirschner, Mark, are you with us?
Yes.
You vote yes?
Yes.
Thank you. And Donna?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. All right, we'll move to our last action item for the day, which is the consideration of a request to swap surface transportation block grant direct attributable funds for surface transportation block grant, or just surface transportation block grant fund. Kelly will introduce the item and our staff from Ncdot.
Good afternoon again. So as was mentioned, the item is the consideration to swap funding sources between SDBGDA funds and SDBG area of flex funds. We performed this exercise before with Ncdot, I think the past 2 years, and it is anticipated that the swap may help us restart with some of our projects. So with that, I think either Dan or Mike Stanley is on the line to kind of help with that, explaining that.
Thanks, Kelly. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Sir.
Okay, thanks, Byron. Appreciate that. So you can advance to the first slide there. Today's discussion be fine. As Kelly mentioned, this is actually, Winston-Salem MPO has actually participated with DOT in a federal fund swap the last couple of years. This is in connection with the efforts that are made every August to obtain additional obligation authority from Federal Highway Administration, which is basically an exercise where they call in any obligation authority that other states have not been able to use and pool it and then redistribute it to those states that have projects that would be able to obligate those additional funds. So in just to give you all a better context for understanding what the request for the fund swap entails, I wanted to just give some background looking at federal aid funding generally, how the August redistribution works, and then just talk about how a swap would function in order to potentially allow additional locally administered projects to move forward in the coming year. Next slide, please. Unlike most federal agencies, the surface transportation funding at the federal level is actually done, it's a contract authority program. And so it's done through a multi-year reauthorization. The most recent reauthorization was the FAST Act. And as many of you are probably aware, that act expired at the end of September. Congress did pass a one-year extension of the act, as well as a continuing resolution to allow for obligation of funds through the middle of next month as part of a continuing resolution effort. So what you see on the screen here is basically under the multi-year bill, contract authority, states are apportioned funding in various what are called core programs, federal aid core programs. Those funds are primarily apportioned by formulas. The formulas are different based on different parameters depending on which core program is being funded. For North Carolina, you know, far and away the most funding goes into the National Highway Performance Program core program, and that principally reflects the importance of the NHS to you know, both multi-state and national interests in terms of both people movement and freight movement. North Carolina gets a little over $600 million a year apportioned in that category. Another key program is the Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG program. Those funds, a portion of the funds come to us as flexible funds that can be used anywhere in the state, whereas the remainder of those STBG funds are actually suballocated according to census-based population categories. The top category is the over 200,000 population. Those funds are actually allocated to the TMAs that get what are known as direct attributable or DA funds. Winston-Salem is one of those MPOs that's a DA recipient. So North Carolina, for the entire direct attributable category, North Carolina gets about $74 million, whereas the remainder of the STBG pot, both the flexible flex funds and the other population suballocation categories together, total a little over $200 million for North Carolina. And then the other programs you see up here, we have Highway Safety Improvement Program, CMAQ, National Highway Freight Program, Metropolitan Planning. We have the Transportation Alternatives Program funding, which is the funding allocations mirror how it's done for the STBG funding, in that there's a certain amount of flex funds, and then there are population suballocations. So North Carolina gets about 17 million of flex plus populations under 200,000, and then about 5 million of DA funding for the TAP program. And then there's also safety Section 130 money that's used for highway, rail, grade crossing safety improvements and crossing closures. Next slide, please. So even though transportation funding at federal level is done as a contract authority program, the actual ability to use funds is still a portion, still appropriations based. So each year there's an appropriations action that takes place. And what Congress does with that action is establish what they call an obligation limit, which is basically tying the estimated contract authority amounts to what the current budget picture looks like at the federal level and the projections over how much funding can actually be released in that particular year. So on this chart, what you see is the various core programs. The bucket at the top in the center there, that's basically showing the difference between our core program apportionments that are done through the multi-year reauthorization bill and the obligation authority that's provided to the states through the annual appropriations process. And as you can see, there's a gap here. Historically, over the years, that's ranged anywhere from the 80s up into around 90%. And as more funds are infused into the Federal Aid Highway Trust Fund from the general fund as a backstop, that gap is narrowing over time. But as you can see, obligation authority is actually, since that is actually federal commitment to reimburse, that's where funds are actually made available at the federal level. The obligation authority has to be directed toward pots of money where we have projects that are sufficiently far along in the delivery process, have expenditures that can be basically billed to the federal highway. And so the obligation authority gets directed to those pots. So disproportionately, that money is going to tend to go to categories like the NHP, the STBG Flex, are primary categories, and to a lesser extent, the safety and the rail program, the Section 130 program. Not as much gets directed to the DA and the CMAQ and the TAP because projects are not always ready to deliver when the funding is made available. So next slide. So just to give you a little background on what we're proposing with the swap, because we get this, North Carolina has benefited over the last several years from August redistribution, we are able to then go back and obligate funds on more projects than we would otherwise be able to obligate and move forward. So again, historically, North Carolina has been receiving in the realm of $30 to $40 million a year in August redistribution. However, in recent years, we've done considerably better than that. The first year that we did DA swaps, North Carolina received $168 million in additional obligation authority. That went down somewhat for 2019 to $116 million, but then has jumped up again in 2020 to $144 million. So in terms of where that obligation authority is directed, the mechanism is that in July, Federal Highway will poll the states and say, how much August redistribution would you be able to utilize if we were to make it available to you? And so the states have to show where they are going to obligate their remaining OA and then where they would be able to obligate it were they to receive additional obligation authority. The catch is those funds have to be obligated by September 30th of that same year. So you're really talking about a less than 2-month window. And typically, we do not get the redistribution notice until toward the end of August. So really, you're talking about a little more than a month window that we have to be able to go in and obligate those additional funds that we might receive. So typically, we've put our obligation authority on projects where we already have expenses accumulated on projects that we have been covering with state funds that we've not actually yet obligated federal funds on. And we do that by means of a mechanism called advanced construction, which is a federal, it's in the federal regulations, but it basically allows Federal Highway to authorize a phase of work to proceed as long as it follows all federal requirements. But the Federal Highway is not committing to reimburse at that point. So really, there's a risk there for a state to use advanced construction that it's possible that for whatever reason, at some future date, Federal Highway may not be able to provide obligation authority or allow funds to be obligated. And so the state has basically fronted the money. So there is some risk there, but to this point, it's really not been a risk because there has been a federal program. It's continued on. Funds are generally provided every year. And so typically at some point, any authorizations that are advanced construction, those authorizations can be converted using future year obligation authority. So what happens is we have a project, we will AC it, say for construction. Construction will move forward. We will accrue expenses. We'll cover those expenditures with state funds. Then at some later date, we go in and we convert by obligating federal funds. And because we've accrued all these expenditures, we can immediately turn around and bill federal highway and receive that reimbursement. Next slide. So traditionally, how a project would be funded is you would go in when you're ready to do a federal authorization, and you would obligate all the funds necessary to cover the estimated cost of that project up front. And so, for example, if you had a $5 million authorization for construction, we would obligate $5 million from our annual OA, and then that would mean there's $5 million fewer dollars that we would be able to direct toward some other project. The issue is when you obligate those funds right up front, you haven't accrued any expenditures. So you've basically got this $5 million obligation or commitment on the books that we have no expenditures that we can immediately bill for. And so we have no billing capacity, but yet that OA cannot be used on something else. And the reimbursement ratio varies depending on the core program and the activity, but typically it's going to be 80% federal, 20% non-federal. Next slide. So what advanced construction does is, as I mentioned earlier, it lets a project move forward, but federal highway is not actually committed funds to reimburse at that point. So the state will basically, the project will move forward, expenditures will be incurred by the contractor, say in the case of construction. The state will pay the contractor with state funds. As expenditures accrue on the project over time, we will go in and partially obligate the project. So let's say you have a $20 million project. We advance construct that project. So no federal funds have been obligated. Then we say over the first few months, we accrue $3 million worth of expenditures. Then we may go in and do a conversion for $3 million and obligate $3 million. Then we can immediately bill federal highway that $3 million, but we don't obligate the rest of the authorization because we don't have expenditures to cover those yet. The benefit here is now instead of obligating $20 million on that project up front, and that's $20 million less obligation authority we have to do other things, we can actually obligate, say, $3 million toward that project to cover the expenditures that accrue, say, in the first several months, and at the same time use the rest of what might have otherwise been the $20 million on this one project. We can use that to do the same thing on other projects. So what it does is it lets us move forward with multiple projects simultaneously, whereas we otherwise may have only been able to move forward with one. Right now, we have roughly $600 million worth of advanced construction on the books. And this is basically where we have projects, expenditures have been incurred, and we've covered those at this point with state funds. So we will use OA to basically convert these funds as expenditures accrue, and then by being able to immediately bill federal highway, we can replenish the state fund. Next slide, please. So what we're proposing with the swap is, because we have under-obligated BGDA historically, and we typically have quite a bit of advanced construction on the books in our NHPP category and STBG flex categories, where we basically have lots of projects, underway, spending money. What we propose is, if the Winston-Salem MPO is agreeable, would be to fund some of those projects that we right now can't we don't have obligation authority remaining because we've used all of our apportionment in those categories. We would propose moving forward on a select number of projects using STBGDA funds instead, with the MPO's permission. Then what we would do is we would provide an equal amount of STBG flex funds beginning in FY22, dollar for dollar, based on whatever amount the MPO would be agreeable to swap. So next slide. So by obligating or by funding those additional Ncdot projects with available DA, by obligating DA, we can then do the AC conversion. We can go in and immediately bill Federal Highway for those expenditures that have accrued. So what that does is it brings cash back in that we add to our cash balance. What that additional cash then allows us to do is to move forward, restart more projects, including locally administered projects. And next slide. So then by receiving this additional obligation limitation, this just illustrates the last point I made in the previous slide. We get this additional obligation authority, we can then distribute that back out to projects that have expenditures in all the various categories. And that in turn will allow more to move forward. Basically, we will use those funds to primarily cover overrun expenditures and convert advanced construction. And so that will allow, by bringing more cash in, that will allow more projects to start in all the categories with the apportionment that comes in FY21. And that apportionment has actually been made available. At some point last month, they did load that into the federal system, so there is now FY20 funding available. So how this plays into locally administered projects specifically, we are now in the process of preparing a DOT-wide spend plan for FY21. So we're taking a holistic look at what cash will be available during the year, what obligation authority will be available during the year, and then looking at what we will be able to restart accordingly. And each MPO has been asked, and I believe Kelly is working with divisions on this, to put together what amounts to a spend plan, but really it's a billing or invoicing plan for your locally administered projects, not just the ones that have recently been restarted, but all of your locally administered projects that are currently active in spending money, as well as any locally administered projects that have not yet been given the green light to move forward, but potentially could be obligated by June of next year. Basically, for all of those locally administered projects, to project if those projects were allowed to move forward as of January 1st, we were to say, yes, those projects can move forward. What would be the schedule over which the local government agencies would anticipate billing, and how much would they anticipate billing? We will then use that information to plug into the DOT spend plan to make a determination of which projects would be able to move forward. So the information that the MPOs provide to us in terms of those locally administered project invoicing projections will go a long way to help us answer that question. So that's pretty much all I had at this point. So I'll open it up for any questions. Byron, I appreciate your running the slides for me there. And just see if there's any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Mike. Does anyone have any questions for Mike? We did bring this item for consideration, mainly because of the timeliness. And as Mike has mentioned, this is not the first year that we have agreed to this, but we did want to bring it to the body as an item for consideration and have you all weigh in and vote, and then we will, Mike will also make the same presentation to the PAC for a final approval. So if there are no questions, then we will ask if there's anyone that would like to make a motion for approval.
Lee Rollins, motion to approve.
Thank you, Lee.
Pat Ivy, second.
Thank you, Pat. So Kirk, it's been moved and seconded. If you could please call the roll for a vote.
Kelly Bennett,
Aye.
Carrie,
Yes.
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly Garvin,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee voted yes. Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Hank,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Mark Kirsner, and Donna. Donna, are you still there? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So that concludes all of our action items. We will move into items that will be presented to us for future consideration. Our first item is item number 10, which is a review of the resolution of endorsement of targets for safety performance measures established by North Carolina Department of Transportation. And today we will have Victoria Bailiff presenting for us. Victoria is a planner in our department. Many of you may not have seen her because I think she came on right about the time that we all were sent home because of the pandemic. So at this time, I will ask Victoria to present item number 10.
Thank you, Tanique. Good afternoon. It's nice to see everyone. So on August 31st, 2020, the Ncdot set its 2021 targets for the state's safety performance measures as required by the Federal Highway Administration. And North Carolina MPOs have 180 days to either endorse the state's targets or set our own targets. The Winston-Salem urban area MPO has always endorsed the state's targets, and the state sets 5 targets or goals, and the first one is to reduce total fatalities by 4.2% each year, and then reduce the fatality rate by 4.35%, to reduce total serious injuries by 3.24%, to reduce serious injury rate by 3.35%, and finally, to reduce the total non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries by 3.65%. And this is just an action item at this meeting. It will come back for action in the January 2021 meeting. And we also have Daryl Vreeland here, and he can answer any further questions regarding how the state handles targeting.
Very good. Thank you, Victoria. Does anyone have questions for either Victoria or Daryl? All right, hearing none, this was an item for information. You will see this again for consideration at our January meeting. We will then move on to our next information item, which will also be presented by Victoria, and that is the review of the Winston-Salem Urban Area Metropolitan Transportation Organization's Public Participation Plan. Victoria?
Thank you. So the MPO adopted its current public participation policy on July 19th, 2012. So it is definitely in need of an update. The public participation plan has been updated to a more user-friendly format and outline. And situations that have arisen due to COVID-19 pandemic have been taken into account in this document, and we've made provisions for virtual public interaction. The update also includes the latest federal acts and a social media policy. It has also updated the contact list in the appendix. The public review process will begin today, November 19th, and continue for the required 45 days until January 3rd, and a public hearing will be held at the beginning of January at the TAC meeting.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions for Victoria? Hearing none, I will just add the comment that I do encourage each of you to review our public participation plan. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or anything that you would get that information back to us, you can send it to Victoria so that that could be incorporated in any modifications that we might need to make before it's finally adopted in January, or included as a part of our public participation comment period, during our public participation comment period. All right. Thank you, Victoria. Very good.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 12, which is the review of the fiscal year 2020 through 2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, amendments and modifications for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. And that is Byron.
Again, everyone, the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or NTIP, again, is a comprehensive listing of all the projects programmed for the Winston-Salem urban area. This document must match the state's Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, which is regularly updated and amended with modification, deletions, and amendments of projects. The included modification amendments before you is available for the public review, has been made available for public review between October 20th and November 19th, 2020. There has been no comments made on these amendments. This is for information and will come back in January 2021 for action. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions about any of the amendments.
Thank you, Byron. Are there any questions for Byron? All right, hearing none, we will move into our staff report. And go ahead, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard someone speak. We'll move to our staff reports. So our first report would be our Transportation Management Area Certification Review. Suzette Morales with FHWA did indicate that she had an item to present to us as it relates to our certification review, which will occur in December. Suzette, are you with us?
No, this is Loretta Barron. I am sitting in for Suzette. She had another meeting this afternoon.
Oh, thank you, Loretta. Welcome.
Thank you. As many of you know, at least every 4 years, the U.S. DOT must certify that the MPO serving a transportation management area is carrying out the metropolitan planning process in adherence with federal statutes and regulations. This is a joint review and certification by FHWA and FTA on behalf of the Secretary. Consistent with federal regulations, the primary purpose of a review is to formalize the continuing stewardship, oversight, and day-to-day evaluations of the planning process and document those findings. The review will ensure that the planning requirements are being met satisfactorily and implemented, and provide an opportunity for advice and guidance to our planning partners in the transportation management area. Any issues raised during the review will provide an opportunity to give targeted technical assistance to the MPO, as well as the planning partners in the area. We will interact with the TMA partners. Since we interact with the partners on a routine basis, reviewing and approving planning products and providing technical assistance, we have streamlined the review process to look at only those areas deemed necessary as part of our review. We will conduct this review with your staffs on Wednesday, December 2nd, and Thursday, December 3rd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on both days. We'll be going over several planning processes and activities, such as the UPWP, your organizational structure, the MTP, TIP, public outreach, and a few other elements of your planning process. We're also offering an opportunity for the TAC and the TAC to provide us any feedback they wish to on December 3rd at 1 p.m. after we have completed our discussions with the staff. So if any of them would like to participate, we just ask that you please sign up for a time to meet with us anytime after 1 p.m. that day. We'd be happy to have a separate discussion with you all. At the end of the review, we will provide a report that will document our findings. We will present it to both the TCC and TAC at the end of the process. And that's it, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Loretta. Does anyone have any questions for Loretta? We'll be sure to get information out to you as, in case any of you are wanting to schedule a time to meet with our FHWA staff. All right, we will move on to our other staff reports. Ncdot Division 9, Pat Ivy.
Thank you very much, Tanika. I've got a couple of updates I want to give everybody. My report, I believe, begins on page 453. The very first project, the Lassiter Road Bridge replacement. Of course, we've been working with the contractor on that for many months to try to get this project completed, and we've had all kinds of issues with that. So we're hopeful that is getting ready to come to a head the beginning of next month, so we can get this project completed. We still anticipate opening the Akron Drive Bridge by the end of the year. Obviously, the wet weather the last couple of weeks has slowed things down, but they're still anticipating getting that project open. A new project, I-5795, on page 453, is a new pavement rehabilitation project on Interstate 40. Basically from Muddy Creek Bridges to, let me see, yes, basically from Harper Road to the Guilford County line, or from the 421 interchange to the Guilford County line, and that does include some bridge rehabilitation. That project was awarded to Flatiron Constructors, and we anticipate that most of the work will begin after the holidays. But that project is about a 2-year project, will end in September of 2022. Update on Beltway project U2579C. We had hoped to open that project, or that section, between 158 and 311 by the end of this year. That is probably not going to happen. We'll likely open by mid-January. The big issue we're dealing with is we've got about a 400-foot section of concrete paving that we've got to do right there at the interchange with 311. And we've got a statewide fly ash shortage that is making it difficult for us to acquire the necessary concrete to put in there. So they're moving forward, but it will probably be mid-January before that segment opens. And then the last thing over on page 457 on U2579AB, which is the Beltway section from Salem Parkway down to Interstate 40. We are rapidly attempting to acquire right-of-way on that remaining section with an intent of letting that project in December of 21. The schedule says May. That was just not possible with all the right-of-way and utilities that had to be done, but they are working with great speed right now, and our intent is to get that let contract in December. And Section AA, right behind it, the last segment of I-74 should be, it's on schedule for October of 22. So those are my updates, subject to any additional questions.
Thank you, Pat. Does anyone have any questions for Pat? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO Transportation Project updates. Kelly?
Yes, ma'am. In your packet is the list of our current projects. As you heard from Mike, we are working to provide them with a list of projects along with the spend plan. So I will be reaching out to you. I know I've reached out to some of you already to go over all your priorities, but I will get back and reach back to you again about what your spending plan is for some of these projects, so that we can I can have a comprehensive list to submit to Ncdot. So just really look out for me to reach out to you here soon. Other than that, I have nothing to add over what's already in the packet.
Does anyone have any questions for Kelly? All right, very good. Thank you, Kelly. We will move on to Ncdot Transportation Planning Update. Darrell?
Good afternoon, folks. I did want to comment on one thing. There was the 5310 application, and Scott had mentioned he wasn't sure about Ncdot or about those funds. I texted my contact in the IMD division. What he tells me is that the application for 5310 funds is due December 1st, which shouldn't be anything new, I guess, for you guys, but that's just by the way. I don't, that's about all I can add to that conversation because I don't deal on FTA funds. I didn't want to
Thank you for checking into that for us.
Sure. Is there any new information? You already knew all that, I hope.
I think the applicants knew of the deadline. The question was, were they going to distribute funding since they were primarily focused on the CARES Act funding?
Well, I said we'd be distributing, and the answer was yes, the deadline is 12/1.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
That was the answer I got there. Updates from a transportation planning division. As you've talked about today, the safety performance measures are due February next year. There is the public transit safety targets. So the item today, let me look for it in the agenda here, was the transit. So it's the transit authority's targets, but I believe the MPO needs a different resolution to have the MPO's establishment of those targets.
Yes, I think my understanding was we have 180 days after we have adopted their targets to then, their plan to then have this body adopt target.
So
Unless I'm misunderstanding that.
Well, so give me a second. I just got an email on this for the first time because again, I'm not plugged into FTA. This morning, and I got to find out who copied me. Oh gosh, what the?
And Daryl, we might want to maybe have that conversation after this meeting.
Okay.
To roll over into the TAC meeting.
Sure, that's right. I want
So I can reach out to you, if not this afternoon, maybe tomorrow.
Sure, tomorrow will work.
Okay.
So yeah, the P-task targets we'll look at, and finally the MPO PL fund allocation. We have not typically around this time. You would hear from Transportation Planning Division letting the MPO know how much planning funds are available for the next fiscal year. We're still waiting for a few checks to clear in the bank so that we can, so our bank balance gets updated so we can distribute it all appropriately instead of in two parts. So we are expecting that to come shortly. Hopefully, well, next week. Hopefully next week. Oh, it's Thanksgiving week, but so in coming, whatever, 2 weeks or something like that, roughly. We're hoping to hear from that and get those letters out. That concludes my update.
Thank you, Daryl. I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Okay.
Are there any questions for Daryl? No. Okay. Piedmont Triad Regional Council of Governments update. I don't recall Lynn being on the call. All right. Forsyth County OEAP air quality update. Carrie?
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
All right, very good. Bicycle and pedestrian facilities projects update. Matthew?
Thank you, Tanique. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matthew Burchak. I'm with the Winston-Salem MPO, and just wanted to provide a quick update on a greenway planning effort. Ncdot has been working through their Great Trail State Plan, and that is a greenway plan looking at trails throughout the state that have a regional significance to them. So not necessarily every trail in every community, but trails that have that regional significance. For example, our Piedmont Regional Greenway here between Winston-Salem and Greensboro. And they recently reached one of the milestones for that plan. They have a draft network of trails, and they are opening that draft network up for public review and comment. So you might have seen an email that Kirk sent out. Thank you, Kirk, for sending that out. With some information about how to get involved in that process. So take a look at that email, and there are links there so you can view the maps online, download those maps, and provide comments on the trails that have been identified.
Very good. Thank you, Matthew. Were there any questions for Matthew? All right, the Winston-Salem Transit Authority update. Donna? Okay, we may have lost her. So the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation update. Mark?
Yes, good afternoon. I don't have anything else to add other than what's in our report. Would be glad to answer any questions if anyone has them.
Are any questions for Mark? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to our Davidson County Transportation. Richard?
Yeah, good afternoon. On the question that Scott had raised earlier about the 5310, I think he was talking about the 2021 grants. And I have an email into Doug Duffy with Senior Services. I believe we have those grant agreements in place, and that IMD is committed to funding the 5310 for this year, but I'm going to verify that just to make sure. But other than that, I don't have anything to add. I didn't have a report this month in. We're still operating as dollar ride. We're not operating our deviated fixed routes right now because of the social distancing and all those kind of requirements. We just can't run with and leave people sitting at the stops to run safely.
Okay. Very Very good. Any questions for Richard? Thank you. All right, Title VI compliance update. Marlene?
Good afternoon, everyone. Tonight, there's nothing to report at this time.
All right, very good. Any questions for Marlene? All right, we will move on to our MPO calendar of activities. Byron?
I don't have a lot to add. I just want to make sure that we made note that per the discussion that we was having earlier about the federal certification review, we typically try to tie in a public meeting to give the public an opportunity to speak on this. We usually try to tie it into one of our TAC or TCC meetings that is occurring during the day. Because we're doing a virtual format, we are now going to hold that public meeting on December 3rd from 5 to 6:30. We will send out the information about that public meeting. We've also sent it for advertising in the local newspapers, at the libraries, as well as on our website. Just wanted to make sure we pointed that out.
Very good. Thank you.
Hey, Tanique, this is Pat. And Byron, have we determined the dates for the MPO meetings in 2021 yet? Just for calendar purposes.
Yes, we can send those dates out.
That helps to go ahead and get those on the calendar so they don't get taken up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, we will send those out. All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Ethics Liaison, Kurt.
Nothing to add at this point. Everyone is current on their requirements. Once we get everyone seated on reconstituted boards here in December, we'll see if there's any new appointments. Certainly, Mr. Bessie will be coming off the TAC, so we know that there'll be a new appointment potentially for Winston-Salem, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Kurt? Hearing none, our next meeting is scheduled for January 21st, 2021. And here's to hoping that everyone has a very joyous Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday and into the new year, and that everyone remains safe and healthy. So with that being said, I don't think we need to move in second for an adjournment, do we? We do not. Does anyone have anything for the good of the body? Very good. Well, then we are adjourned and hope to see you all at the TAC meeting. Thank you.